struggled in college. And then I was working with this really famous golf coach, Joe Thiel, in the state of Washington in Seattle. And I was striving to become a professional golfer. I was watching a documentary on Tiger Woods at that time. So here I am training, trying to be a professional golfer. And I was watching this episode on TV. Tiger Woods came out and he was being interviewed. I got so intimidated by watching this documentary because Tiger's mentality was all about crushing his opponents. Like, I'm going to eat you up alive and I'm going to enjoy it. Kind of like a predator, like a tiger. And I'm here thinking, holy smokes, how am I going to compete against people like that? Like, I'm training to go up against professional athletes like Tiger. That's literally going to be my opponent. I felt so small and intimidated. I turned off the TV. I was scared and I started praying. And I said, God, if you want me to do this, please make me more like Tiger. Like, please make me more ruthless and more competitive. And please, God, change me. And in that still moment, I still remember this. He said, Matthew, why would I change you when I made you so perfectly?
Welcome back, everybody, to episode number 3 of the Mind Your Game podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Dustin Donner, and Dr. Matt Park has joined me this fine morning for our episode. Welcome, Dr. Matt.
All right. I'm excited, man.
Yes, sir. Let's get this show on the road. And today's episode is going to be all about why we do what we do. And Dr. Matt and I are going to be exploring a couple guiding principles, activities, techniques, tools, and talking about kind of our own personal journeys as well on today's episode.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this particular one because when anyone can discover their why, then the how and the what just naturally falls into place. And kind of identifying this North Star of yours, why we do what we do. And if you can identify the core values that drive you, that matter to you, that are meaningful to you, when you are faced with a fork in the road or when you're faced with different challenges that come up in life, it could be small daily conversations or really big life-changing decisions, these guiding principles will guide you. Oftentimes when I'm working with leaders or athletes, it's going back to identifying, recognizing, and knowing, being self-aware of what your guiding principles are. So I'm really excited to kind of dig deep on this one.
Yeah. And that's a great explanation, Dr. Matt, and kind of talking about the leaders, the athletes, the business owners that you have worked with or still working with. I'm curious for yourself, when did you start to think about what age these guiding principles, your values, and kind of your why? When did that start to come to mind for you personally?
So it's funny, I'm smiling because I remember a time when I grew up playing competitive golf and I was in a sudden death playoff for this junior championship with a good friend of mine, James Hahn, and he's a PGA professional golfer now. And we go way back. He's kind of like my brother from a different mother. He and I were in a sudden death playoff and we're kind of neck to neck. And I ended up beating him and winning that tournament. I remember after that tournament, he took it really hard and he went past the scoreboard, signed his card, and he was crying. And I felt devastated. Like I was so distraught. And I went up to him and I started crying too. And I put my hand around his shoulder and I said, I promise, James, like, don't cry. I promise the next time you can beat me, like next time I'll let you win type of thing. Even though he kicks my butt all the time right now. But I remember that moment my mom caught me seeing the whole scenario pan out. And she knew deep down, man, my son Matt is not meant to be a competitive golfer. Like she knew, and that was only like, 10 or 11 years old. And she knew from an early age, even though I had so much success growing up as a competitive junior golfer, she knew in that moment that wasn't makeup. That wasn't my core value. And so I didn't know that. And I kept pursuing competitive golf. I got a full scholarship to play in college. I struggled in college. And then I was working with this really famous golf coach, Joe Thiel, in the state of Washington in Seattle. And I was striving to become a professional golfer. I was at my half sister's house in her basement, staying over and watching a documentary on Tiger Woods at that time. This was later in my college years and trying to turn professional. So here I am training, trying to be a professional golfer. And I was watching this episode on TV. Tiger Woods came out and he was being interviewed. I got so intimidated by watching this documentary because Tiger's mentality was all about crushing his opponents. Like, I'm going to eat you up alive and I'm going to enjoy it. Kind of like a predator, like a tiger. And I'm here thinking, holy smokes, how am I going to compete against people like that? Like, I'm training to go up against professional athletes like Tiger. That's literally going to be my opponent. I felt so small and intimidated. And immediately I turned off the TV. I was scared and I started praying. And I said, God, if you want me to do this, please make me more like Tiger. Like, please make me more ruthless and more competitive. And like, it's going to be a dog eat dog world. So change me, please, please, God, change me. And in that still moment, I still remember this. He said, Matthew, why would I change you when I made you so perfectly? And I felt like in that moment, what I did, I got inspired. I got a blank piece of paper and I split this paper in half. On the left side, I wrote all of Tiger's traits that I felt: competitive, ruthless, passionate, and aggressive, all the things that I felt from Tiger. And on the right side, I wrote all the things that were important to me, all the things that resonated with me, like compassionate, friendly, supportive, a really good friend, a good listener, harmonious, peaceful. And it was just very true. And I looked at that list, and at first I was praying for God to change all these qualities on the right, get rid of those so I can be more like the qualities on the left. And when he said, Matthew, why would I change you when I made you just as you were supposed to be, as you were meant to be? What I did, I ripped the paper in half. I got rid of that left side of Tiger's and I just stared at my traits that were natural to me. And I looked at these qualities and I said, okay, what is these qualities really good at? What am I natural at? And that's how I fell into psychology, into counseling, into coaching. I was just born to be a coach. I love helping people. I love serving. And that's the beginning of the story.
Wow. So all the way from playing junior elite golf to being 10, 11 years old, competing against people that are PGA Tour players now, all the way till college and seeing that documentary. A lot of people usually stop there, Dr. Matt. Like, even in college, they're like, you know what? I see that my values are different than what I'm doing. They're not aligned with what I'm doing professionally or personally. And then they kind of just throw it to the side and keep plugging away because they feel as though everyone else wants them to continue to do the path they are on. But it sounds like you kind of didn't fall victim of that. You pushed through with your values that you saw in your characteristics and move towards the life that you want. So I'm curious, how were you able to do that when a lot of people can't?
I think two things come for me. Because I've experienced so many trials and tribulations, because I struggled in golf so much, and I tried to pursue a career in music, and that didn't work out. And I just felt like I was trying to be someone else my whole life. It didn't feel authentic to me. And for the first time when I was watching that documentary and I heard God whisper in my ear, Matthew, why would I change you if I made you so perfectly? Was the first time I really felt aligned and authentic to my voice, my character, and who I was meant to be. And it just felt right. And so after experiencing something that felt really true and authentic, that became my North Star. And I think by identifying that North Star, and of course I get a veer off the path, but if I keep reminding myself that moment, I keep remembering that moment of my North Star, why I do what I do, then I come back to staying in alignment to that. And everything, and I'm very lucky. I feel very privileged and lucky because I found what I'm passionate in. I found what my calling and my purpose is, and it's something that I can monetize. In the Japanese culture, there's this word called ikigai, and it's at the heart of your calling, your passion, and what you can actually do to monetize your services, your work. And if you can collectively put all those three together, then I think you are in alignment of what you were meant to do.
And within that term and that phrase, and I'm sure in that part of your life, was everyone that was in your corner, in your circle, supportive of that? Or were there some people that were skeptical?
I think they saw how natural it was from the very beginning. But I go back to a poem by Theodore Roosevelt. It's called The Man in the Arena. And this poem is the basis of Brene Brown's work, the social worker and the leadership coach. Brene Brown recites Theodore Roosevelt's Man in the Arena because it's not the critic who matter, right? It's not the audience, it's not the people who are skeptical of that, but it's the person in the arena getting scarred and marred, but they are fighting valiantly. They're in the ring fighting for what they're passionate for, regardless of the outcome of the result. And every competitive athlete, every person that, we're working with are in the arena fighting. And I think if you just have your supportive team that believe in you, I think you just keep going back to that board of advisors or your mentors or the people that are really backing you, and you just hold those words and that advice true to you, like they're in your corner, and you just listen to those voices as opposed to everyone else, like social media. I think that's what I did. Like I had some very important people, mentors, people that believed in me, people that I trusted, and I kept calling them, and I kept making sure that I was held accountable. And I tried not to listen to the voices of all the other noise out there, because for the first time, again, I was listening to my own voice. It was authentic to me. And that's what the power of standing on guiding principles is all about. The power of identifying your core values and leaning into that, because that's going to help you make decisions and choices that's going to help you in the right path.
Yeah. And I love how you brought up that poem of the man in the arena, because not only the people that we work with, but I think everyone that is listening to our podcast or viewing it visually on YouTube is that person in the arena. Because with what goes on in today's culture, today's society, everybody is fighting their own battles. If that's the athlete on the field fighting their battles, if that is the doctor that's a little shaky during surgery, if that is the everyday Joe that is just struggling to make ends meet, I think everybody is that person in the arena. And I'm just curious, Dr. Matt, with now knowing that information, what would you say that first step is after recognizing that you are that person in the arena alone at times?
Yeah. So I think the hardest thing is quieting the noises of the world and others, and really hearing your own voice. I think that's really hard to do in this day and age. I think we are bombarded by information. I think we're bombarded by opinions. And nowadays, AI has gotten so strong that we don't know what to believe. Like, we're watching something and we don't know, like, now we're second guessing. Is this real? Is this true? Is this fake news? And so I think there's an opportunity here where when we identify our core values, then I think that's the hardest step, is to identify your core values. Then
Mm.
we can start to get to work. We can roll up our sleeves and really refine this North Star approach that can help a lot of leaders grow and a lot of people grow. So once you identify that you are the person in the arena, man, woman, player, you know that this life is going to be challenging. It's going to be full of challenges. But the first step, and I even have this in my book, the first step is to mind map. Do you mind if I guide you through an exercise?
Please do. This episode of the Mind Your Game podcast is brought to you by Caddy Snacks, the perfect fuel for golfers who want to perform at their best on and off the course. Made with clean ingredients and designed for long-lasting energy, Caddy Snacks keeps you focused from the first tee to the final putt. And with our code MIND20, you can get 20% off your first order. Grab your next round of Caddy Snacks at www.eatcaddysnacks.com. Now back to the podcast.
Yeah. And I'm curious about your story too. So after I kind of share this exercise of how people, the listeners, can go through this exercise themselves to kind of identify, then I'd love to ask you your story too, Dustin.
Of course.
Yeah. Once you identify yourself playing this game of life and you're in the arena, the exercise that I often have people do is a mind mapping exercise. So what mind mapping is to list out, and you can Google this, all these different words of core values or philosophies, like chasing after peace, or like, what does happiness mean? So what makes you happy? Well, friendships, strong relationships, trust, accountability, success. So if you think about what makes you light up, what motivates you, what makes you happy, then you start identifying all these different words, right? And these words pop up, and circle. So you print out a list of all these words, circle as many as you want that resonate with you, that really stand out to you, and just identify a pattern here and just recognize what words you're circling. And again, you can Google core values or mind mapping, or just list of values, list of core values, and circle as many as you want. After you do that first step, then I want you to narrow down that list to identifying 5, your top 5 from all the words that you circled. Identify the top 5. And once you identify the top 5, then you narrow it down to 2. And once you narrow it down to 2 guiding principles or core values, the ones that speak to you the strongest, the ones that really, really resonate with you, whatever they are, now take those 2 core values, put it right in front of you, and ask yourself these 2 questions. Number 1, what do they look like in action? If I were to live out this, and I was at my best, and I was living out these core values or these guiding principles, what would it look like in my life? How would my interactions be if I was actually playing it out? And number 2, what are some barriers that get in the way of me acting these out more in my life? What gets in the way? So, for example, let's say integrity boils down to one of my 2. For me, let's say what integrity means is being honest with myself, being honest with others. Even when no one's looking, I do the right thing. I would ask myself, what does it look like? If I were to play this out, it would look like, even when no one is looking, I'm still picking up the trash. I'm still being honest with my numbers. I pay people accordingly based on what I have already promised, because trust and integrity is very important for me. You do everything behind the scenes, even when no one's looking. That's how it would play out. Now, the second question, what are some barriers that get in the way of me acting out integrity most of the time? A possible barrier could be the scarcity mindset. Like, I'm realizing I'm struggling financially, let's say. And so if I just sneak in a little bit here and no one will know, right? Just this one time because my family needs it. Oh, I'm doing this for someone else. Like the barrier or the challenge that might come up for me that get in the way of me acting out with integrity would be whenever I feel like I'm having a scarcity mindset and I need more for survival, for needs. Then I jeopardize my integrity. Those are some barriers that might come up in acting out and living out my core values. So this whole exercise is about identifying a list of all your core values, circling as many as you want in the beginning, then narrowing it down to your top 5, and then doing the hard work of narrowing it down to the 2 that stand out to you. And then you ask yourself, okay, what does it look like if I'm living it out? And what gets in the way of me living that out? And if you can do that work of identifying this whole standing on guiding principles and mind mapping, then you are way ahead of the game. Because if you know that, that can start guiding you towards your North Star.
And do you feel as though sometimes within that exercise, some people find that ultimately what they're doing in life, maybe personally or professionally, that they thought it was their purpose, after doing this exercise, it kind of shows them they're doing the kind of complete opposite?
Yeah. I did this with a golfer once, and they first thought that, they were pursuing success, like winning, competitive. That was something that was really important for them because that's what they were kind of born and trained to do, which makes sense. After doing this whole mind mapping exercise, what they found was one of the things that was really important for them was honesty. For whatever reason, honesty came up, and I think the other one was integrity. So there were kind of 2 different words, and that meant 2 different things for this person. But what surprised this athlete was honesty was never something that they even thought about. So then they went deeper and they said, okay, what does honesty mean to me? Why did this bubble up as my top 2 guiding principles? Am I being honest with myself? I might require honesty from others, and it's very important for me. But what this athlete realized was they weren't being honest with themselves. They were honest with other people, but they were lying to themselves a lot of times, masking their emotions, masking what they truly thought or felt, and didn't necessarily communicate it to other people. So this really shifted their perspective on what the word honesty meant to them. And then it was more of an internal, introspective look of, wow, I realized I'm not being honest with myself. I'm not living out my guiding principles. So this was a awakening, this exercise.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a great point, Dr. Matt, in working with that golfer. For all the listeners out there, for anyone viewing this episode today, your value could be integrity, and mine could be integrity, and Dr. Matt's could be integrity, one of our top 2 values. But like Dr. Matt was just mentioning, we might all have a different definition of that same label and that same value. And I think, Dr. Matt, that point that you brought up, a lot of people are very quick nowadays to label something. Let's just say one of our values is integrity, but just because we labeled it doesn't make it the same. So we need to take that deeper dive and take that step back and recognize what label we're putting on things and what that means to us. Because what it might mean to us might mean something totally different than the person we're sharing it with or talking to. And then their opinions and their biases can get in on the value that is actually guiding our lives towards the life that we want.
I love that. It can mean a word, can mean different things to different people. That's why in our work, Dustin, we say, when someone says, man, I want to be successful, oftentimes we can immediately just bypass that because we all have this understanding of what success means. But if we are really curious and if we really want to do the work and serve them, we just point it right back at them and ask them, what does that mean to you? What does being successful mean? What does the word successful mean? Because success, even as common as that word might sound, can mean completely different things to different people. So getting curious and exploring it, so perfect. Now, I have a question. Yeah, I have a question for you.
Yeah, go.
why do you do what you do? Like got you in this field of counseling? What got you in this field of serving people and mental performance and even MPGA and Mind Your Game podcast? What was your journey?
Yeah, I think as you ask that question, Dr. Matt, I think the first thing that comes up is for all the viewers and listeners, I love to stay busy. So with Dr. Matt listing out all those ventures and all these new adventures and stuff like that, I think ultimately a lot of people ask the question like, why do you do what you do? And I ultimately think it's like a loaded question in a sense, because we have to get curious, not only ourselves, but the person that has asked that question. And ultimately, there's a whole backstory on why I do what I do. And it also starts from a young age, just like Dr. Matt's. I think from when I was born until now, always being an athlete was part of my identity. I still identify as an athlete, doing marathons and triathlons and stuff like that in the future. I always want to be an athlete, and being the oldest of three. So it's me, my middle sister, and my youngest brother. So being the oldest of three, I was always looked at as the protector of the family and the helper and the caretaker. So I think from such a young age, being an athlete, having multiple different kinds of concussions within sports, my last one being in football, and just remembering my coach just kind of shoving me back out there and being like, play. And right at that time, I knew something's not right with this. Like something, even when I was, I think 11 years old, when I had that last concussion in football, I was like, something doesn't feel right here, which kind of goes to what we were talking about, Dr. Matt, when it comes to the guiding principles and the values. Even from that young of an age, I knew my purpose was being crossed and my values, there's a boundary being crossed in that moment. And took myself out of the game, went to the hospital, got a CAT scan, knew I had a concussion. The doctors told me I had a concussion. And from that moment on, I always knew that I wanted to help and serve people. And I did not know until I got to college to study sports and exercise psychology that it was going to be athletes and business owners and leaders that ultimately I wanted to work with. Because I feel as though being an athlete myself, having the background, I saw that not necessarily, I didn't have the coach, I didn't have the support system, especially being a young male athlete, to have the space to talk about things like this. And I feel as though mental health with athletes in general is super important, but especially for young male athletes because of this stigma behind talking about your feelings and your emotions. And I think Dr. Matt and I can be the first ones to testify. When we work with somebody, we're not going to just sit back, cross our legs, put our fingers together, our fists together, and just say, how do you feel? And that's the only thing we talk about within our work. And I think ultimately I wanted to break that stigma. And in turn, it helped me serve my purpose in being able to provide the services that I didn't get or receive at such a young age that now I can do within MPGA, I can do within this podcast, and I can do within the one-on-one coaching that I do as well. So ultimately, that kind of sums up why I do what I do in that loaded question.
I love that. I catch myself, Dustin, all the time when I get so tempted to ask that question. How do you feel? What's coming up for you? I I have all these different stories. Oh, don't ask that question. Don't ask that question. I don't want to be stereotypical, but I think us, especially as male athletes, to understand the language of emotions, not just label them as tired, I'm okay, I'm good. You know, like our emotional landscape is so complex that if we can help guide athletes or leaders, or especially, I mean, there's this thing with this society where we're getting a little bit more lazier, I think, because with AI, we're not thinking critically as much, and we're having others tell us what to think or what to feel. But if we start doing that work of the digging and the exploring, it's just going to help you identify what's important to you and what's not important to you. And that's Brene Brown said this in her research. So my wife studied under Brene Brown a while back, and she said the most generous people in life are the most boundaried people. And what that means, like Mother Teresa, if you think about a person who exudes generosity and service, you think of people like Mother Teresa, maybe Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers. And you think about, okay, the most generous people are the most boundaried people. Now, what does that mean? Well, boundary is knowing how to say yes and knowing how to say no, and knowing what's right and what's wrong, and staying very firm. I'm holding a very strong boundary and a line of this is yours and this is mine. And I think Mother Teresa and Mr. Rogers were very clear on their guiding principles, on their core values of what was a yes and what was a no. And they didn't falter. And if they did, they quickly got back on standing on their guiding principles, and they lived life that way. And they made such a big impact. That's why this understanding of what our guiding principles are, number one, identifying them and then standing on them and then living them out, can be of service to the world and to the people that we encounter in life. So I love that story of yours. That's awesome. I didn't realize that was kind of why you did what you do. I see it in your interactions. I see it in our conversations, even off the podcast. I see it in you, of your strong desire of serving and helping. So that's cool.
Thank you, Dr. Matt. I will say it hasn't always been like that. And I think, kind of going back to what you were just talking about with the generosity, I think at such a young age, for myself personally, it was always trying to be about myself, putting myself first, but in a sense of selfishness. And I think I got to this point where that didn't serve a purpose for me anymore. And it was going against those values, those guiding principles. And I think ultimately, with the exercise that you have done today on the podcast, I think that's the start of all of this. Because if you have those guiding principles and those values, you believe in them and have trust in them, then that establishes trust and confidence within yourself to be able to set those boundaries and show up regardless of how someone else shows up, and be yourself. Right? Like, I know that there's many times for myself and probably for other people where we could have showed up to the podcast episode today and say Dr. Matt's a little bit off, right? If I wasn't staying true to myself and my guiding principles, that would throw me off and I would show up totally different.
Yeah.
Right? So it's about getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. If you're able to have those guiding principles and trust in them and trust in yourselves, you're able to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. That may be an interaction with someone else. That may be asking your boss for a raise, something along those lines. And I feel as though guiding principles and values is just the start of all of that. That's the beginning.
Great. I want to pull on something real quick before we end.
Yeah.
Something that you said, when you know what your guiding principles are and you stand on them, you're able to be more confident in your decisions. You're able to trust yourself more. And I want to give a little plug to Sydney Clanton. We've been working with Sydney for these past few months, building up the MPGA Plus program. And she said something in the tour performance putting system that we're creating. She said, as putters for golfers, a lot of times we're either confident and believe in our putting or we're not confident. But what you just said there, Dustin, about understanding what our guiding principles are and then standing on them, knowing what they are, then we can trust the decisions that we make. It will produce more confidence. Something along those lines you said. And it reminded me of what Sydney's building right now for MPGA Plus. She said in putting, there's 3 essential skills. If we break down putting to become a tour level putter, a great putter, because she played 14 years on the LPGA Tour, so she knows her stuff. And she said, green reading is a skill that you have to be able to assess and evaluate to know, how do you practice green reading? Because if you think about putting, we can read greens or, man, my green reading was off. Well, how do you measure that? How do you improve on that? That's a skill that we're teaching in MPGA Plus. Number 2 is like speed control. Are you able to hit the ball or roll the ball slow, medium, and fast and still make it? Are you hitting the back of the cup? Are you dying it in? How can you work on your speed? And then the last skill is start line. And what she said, tying this all together, is You might not be confident in your putting, but if you can be confident in one of these three skills and break them down. So let's say my speed is way off, like I'm just blowing it way past, or I'm lagging, my putt's really, really short, but my green reading and my start line is really good. I believe in it. Then I know that I can focus my attention and gain confidence and belief around my green reading ability because I worked on it. And I know I need to work on my speed, but I don't focus on that because whenever I think about that, it depletes my confidence level. But I want to put my eggs in the basket where it's going to increase my confidence level. And if I know that I'm really good at green reading and I've tested myself and evaluated, then my confidence and my belief go up in my putting ability. So instead of generalizing confidence of, oh, yeah, man, I had a good putting day, or I didn't have a good putting day, my confidence is shot, I just don't believe I can putt. Rather than labeling it and generalizing it, this program that we're building, that, you know, Sydney's kind of taking the lead in, is get really clear on these three skills: evaluate, train, and drill yourself. So I encourage everyone who's interested in getting better at their putting. This is a program that we're going to be releasing next month, and it's pretty exciting.
Yes, sir. And I think that is a great tie into the guiding principles that we talked about. Those three principles are the guiding principles to being confident in putting. From what we're putting together with the MPGA Plus community, those three principles is what can make you confident in putting again.
Exactly.
And I feel as though when we're talking about everything that we have today, getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, creating our values and guiding principles, and just like Dr. Matt finding his North Star, now you all can too, with kind of what we have talked about today and the exercise that Dr. Matt has walked us all through. And when you establish your guiding principles, you are able to detach yourself from the outcome because you know what you ultimately care about is following those values and guiding principles. So we encourage you all to find those values, find those guiding principles, find your North Star so you can increase the quality of your life and take control of your life and bring it towards the life that you want. Because ultimately, that's what Dr. Matt and I want to see for everyone that's listening and watching this podcast today. That's what we want from you all.
Mind your game.
Yes, sir. And with that being said, thank you, Dr. Matt, for joining us today and sharing a little piece of your book and some knowledge with myself, all the listeners and watchers, and for everyone else out there. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And this will be the end of episode 3 with Dr. Matt and myself of the Mind Your Game podcast. We're now on YouTube, we're on Spotify, and we will be on Apple Podcasts as well. So please continue to check us out. We will be releasing 2 episodes a month. That will be the second Friday and the fourth Friday of every single month. We can't wait to hear from you all here soon, and we'll see you shortly. Have a great rest of your day.
Cheers.